Hello, my name's Kael, and I was abandoned at birth because my parents said I was broken, not sick, not dying, just inconvenient. They never looked back, but I got lucky. A quiet Japanese couple took me in, loved me, raised me like I mattered. And just when I built a life I could finally be proud of, those same birth parents came back, demanding I return to them. Why now? What were they really after? I thought the worst part was their betrayal, but it turns out that was only the beginning. Would you give your past a second chance if it came back to destroy everything? The rain hadn't stopped since before dawn, and by the time I pulled out of the driveway, the sky looked like it hadn't slept either. Mist clung to the edges of my windshield, and the wipers made their slow, rhythmic sweep, like breathing. In Seattle, rain isn't news, but on mornings like this, it's more than weather. It's a weight. It seeps into your chest if you're not careful. I always say I'm used to it, but sometimes I catch myself gripping the steering wheel a little tighter when droplets race down the glass, tracing the same paths over and over. It reminds me of hospitals, waiting rooms filled with silence, soft voices, and smells that never really leave your memory. I took a deep breath. "Morning, Kael. Get a grip," I muttered. "That's me, Kael Rooker, 36, software architect, husband, homeowner. On paper, a tidy life. Raised by the kindest people I've ever known, Hannah and Daichi Rooker. My parents, not the ones who made me, the ones who chose me." As I reached for my coat, Hannah's voice called from the hallway. "You always forget this." She handed me a neatly folded handkerchief, white cotton, soft from hundreds of washes, with tiny stitched letters on the corner. "For you." "Mom." I smiled. "Thanks, Mom. I always forget mine." "You always do," she said gently, her eyes warm. "Drive safe." I tucked the handkerchief into my jacket pocket. Didn't think twice about it, but it stayed there all day. On the drive downtown, my mind drifted. I've built a quiet life out of routines. Commute, work, dinner, silence. My peace is constructed like code, layer by layer, airtight. But if you peel the layers back, you'll find something I rarely talk about. The silence I come from. There's a memory I avoid, but some days it catches up. I was barely 2 days old, too small to hold a bottle, but not too small to be judged. They said I was defective. A nurse whispered that to another staff member as she scrawled something on a clipboard. Defective, a word that doesn't belong to a child. I wasn't sick, not really. Just born with something they didn't want. Something they wouldn't name. The next thing I remember is cold. Cold fingers, cold light, cold air in my lungs. And then nothing. Because they were gone. I've seen their names on old hospital records, blurred ink on crinkled pages. But I've never heard their voices. Except once. Almost. At 7 years old, I learned the truth, that I wasn't theirs by blood, that someone else had given me away. I asked questions. I was too young to understand, but old enough to feel the gap. One night, I found the number. I don't remember how. Maybe a drawer left open, a paper tucked into a book. I dialed it 3 times. No one answered. I sat by the phone until the sun vanished behind the trees outside. My palms were damp. My heart pounded in that way only kids understand. When you believe maybe, just maybe, it's your fault the world is so quiet. I never tried calling again. Instead, I buried it. Because Hana and Daichi loved me the way no one else ever had. They raised me with the kind of discipline that taught me to fold laundry with precision, but also the kind of love that made even failure feel safe. We celebrated small things, Clean rooms, full dinner plates, quiet apologies. They never asked me to forget, but I did it anyway, just to not disappoint them. I've never said this out loud, not even to my wife. I've always feared letting them down more than I feared remembering where I came from. Today, I remembered. I parked near the office, grabbed my bag, stepped out into the damp air. The sidewalk shimmered with reflections, car lights, neon signs, rain clouds low and brooding. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Probably spam. But something made me look. We need to talk. It's time. I froze. No name, no context. Just those 5 words. My pulse ticked faster. I stared at the screen so long the display dimmed. The number wasn't saved, but the area code, it matched the state where I was born. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Was this a mistake? A scam? A wrong number? Or something worse? By the time I reached the lobby, my thoughts were tangled. Every possibility hit me at once. Identity theft, a prank, or them. No, it couldn't be. I made it through 2 meetings without absorbing a word. My fingers moved over the keyboard, but my mind spun in place. At lunch, I stepped out. Rain again. Always rain. Across the street, near the bus stop, 2 people stood still. A man and a woman. They weren't talking, just watching. The man wore a dark coat. His hands were in his pockets. The woman clutched an umbrella, but didn't open it. And somehow, in the strange way memory works, I knew. His jawline. I've seen it before. In old medical forms. In sketches the adoption counselor once showed me. The slope of it. Sharp. Defiant. Her eyes. I see them every day. In the mirror. I stopped walking. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the weather. They didn't move. They didn't have to. They were exactly who I feared they were. I didn't wave back. I couldn't move. My feet were planted like they'd sunk into the sidewalk. My throat tightened. I couldn't even swallow. It felt like someone had cracked open the past and let it leak into the present. Uninvited. Unwelcome. A stranger brushed past me, bumping my shoulder hard enough to jolt me back to the moment. I blinked and realized I'd been standing there like a statue, right in the middle of foot traffic. Then I heard it. My name. Soft. Tentative. Kael? The voice was male, cautious, like someone testing the strength of a memory. I looked up, and there he was. The man who looked too much like a stranger to mean anything, and too familiar to mean nothing. His eyes scanned my face, as if searching for confirmation. Behind him, the woman offered a faint smile that didn't quite touch her eyes. It was the kind of smile people rehearse in front of a mirror, carefully placed, easy to remove. Kael, it's really you, he said again. I didn't reply. My mind was busy cataloging details like a computer script running in the background, trying to make sense of bad input. His hands, rough, calloused, maybe from work or age or guilt. Her eyes, shifting, unable to hold mine. They stood close, too close, like they were trying to shrink the years with distance. He said his name, followed by hers. Names I already knew. Names I'd seen on paperwork. Cold, clinical, legal forms that never prepared me for hearing them out loud. Michael, Elise. And still, I said nothing. Inside, a storm was building, but I remembered how I was raised. Hello, I said quietly. I wasn't expecting this. My voice betrayed nothing. The Japanese part of my upbringing, the part that taught me to keep my tone respectful even when my heart wanted to scream, slipped in like muscle memory. I stepped back, just enough to breathe. It should have ended there. But then something cracked open. A memory, clearer than a photograph. I was 3. wrapped in a blue blanket. Hannah was carrying me out of the hospital. I remember the smell of her scarf, the way she hummed under her breath. She leaned close and whispered, "You're safe now, Kael. You don't have to be afraid of anyone anymore." I remember believing her. Now, facing the people who left me behind, that memory landed like a punch to the chest. Elise moved her hand toward my arm. I stepped back again, sharper this time. The smile faded from her lips. "We just want to talk," she said softly. Michael nodded. "We've changed. We weren't ready before. But now." It sounded rehearsed, like they'd practiced that line in the car. "You waited 36 years to be ready?" I asked, not bothering to hide the edge in my voice. Elise lowered her eyes. "We know we hurt you." "You don't know me," I said. Michael tried again. "We were young. We didn't know how to raise a child, especially—" He didn't finish the sentence, but I already knew what he meant, because I'd read their words once, years ago, in a file I wasn't supposed to see. A social worker had left it open on her desk. I'd been 17, waiting for her to return, and curiosity got the better of me. There it was, in black ink. Father. "The boy isn't worth raising." Mother. "He won't live a normal life." They said I wouldn't live, that I wasn't worth the effort. Now they stood here, faces aged but intact, acting like we were old friends bumping into each other. My hands were shaking, so I shoved them into my coat pockets. I tried to keep my breathing even. "We just want to know you," Elise said. Michael added, "Where do you live? What do you do? Do they treat you well?" That last question snapped something in me. "They?" I asked. "Your adoptive parents," he clarified. I looked at him for a long second. "They're my parents. You gave up that title." He tried to soften. "We were scared. We made mistakes." I took a breath. "No," I said. "You didn't make a mistake. You made a decision." That stopped them. Elise flinched like I'd slapped her with words. Michael adjusted his stance. "Can we meet again? Maybe have a proper conversation?" "I don't think that's a good idea." "You owe us at least that." The audacity. The casual entitlement. Like history could be rewritten if spoken gently enough. "I have to go," I said, taking a step back toward the street. "Please don't follow me." I turned and walked fast, too fast for comfort. My breath stayed shallow. My pulse pounded in my ears. I didn't look back. 3 blocks later, I reached my car, parked near the edge of the lot behind my building. I unlocked the door, but something caught my eye. Tucked under the windshield wiper, an envelope. I looked around. No one nearby. I opened it slowly. Inside was a photograph. Me, from the day before, walking out of my office. Same coat, same bag. On the back, in thin black ink, "We're not here to harm you. We just want what's fair." I stood there, gripping the photo, heart thudding like a warning bell. This wasn't a coincidence. They had planned this. I just didn't know how far they were willing to go. I drove home, gripping the wheel tighter than I should have. The roads were slick, but it wasn't the rain that made me cautious. Every car behind me felt too close. Every turn in the rear view made my pulse spike. Maybe it was paranoia, or maybe I just learned not to ignore my instincts anymore. At a red light, I checked the envelope again. Same photo, same words. I slid it back into the glove compartment, locked it, and forced my eyes forward. "Just drive home, Kael. Get home." When I pulled into the driveway, the porch light was already on. Hannah always turned it on when it rained. Some old habit about making a house feel warm before someone walks in wet. She opened the door before I could even put my key in. "You're late," she said softly. "You okay?" "Yeah," I replied too quickly. "Just a long day. Traffic." She didn't believe me. I could tell by the way her eyes narrowed just slightly, then relaxed. She didn't press. That was her way, never pushing, always leaving room for me to step forward on my own. "I'll warm up dinner," she offered. "Later. I need a minute." She nodded, watching me with the kind of quiet that had always made me feel safe, and somehow, right now, guilty. I went upstairs to my study, closed the door, and leaned against it. The silence hit hard. No voices, no footsteps, just the hum of the heater and the sound of rain tapping against the windows. I sat down at my desk and pulled out the photo again. They'd been watching me before they ever spoke. That's what really got me. This wasn't a chance encounter. This was orchestrated. I laid the photo down and grabbed a pen. I started jotting notes, times, dates, where I'd been, trying to anchor myself with facts. It felt ridiculous and necessary at the same time. Something about writing it down made it real, made me less at their mercy. I opened my laptop. Just for curiosity, I typed my name into the search bar. I don't usually Google myself. Never saw the point. But tonight, I needed to know what they might have seen. On the third page of results, I found it. A small blog post from a family law enthusiast digging into abandoned infant adoption cases. It mentioned a tech executive with Japanese-American adoptive parents, originally from Ohio, raised in Seattle, speculated on my ethnicity, called it a mystery. It had been posted 2 days ago. 2 days before they approached me. My stomach dropped. They were laying the groundwork, setting the stage, framing a version of me they could work with. Or against. I closed the browser and stared at the reflection of myself on the dark screen. This isn't just about reunion. This is strategy, and it's starting to feel like war. I leaned back, ran my fingers through my hair, and closed my eyes. For a second, I let myself drift, back to when I was younger, back to all the things I tried not to remember. I used to think I was defective, not in the broken arm or bad heart way, but in the quiet way kids believe they're too much or not enough. I used to sit in therapy offices, nodding politely, never really letting anything out. I bailed halfway through sessions more times than I could count. Because digging felt dangerous, remembering meant reliving. I thought I'd buried all that. But now it felt like the past had filed a subpoena. A knock on the door pulled me out of the spiral. Daiichi, my father. He entered quietly, holding a cup of tea. "Can I leave this here?" he asked. I nodded, swallowing hard. "Thanks." He didn't ask why I was hiding in my study or why I hadn't come down for dinner. He just said, "Whatever it is, we face it together." Then he left. No lectures, no assumptions, just presence. I stared at the tea until it went cold. That's when another line hit me. Something my biological father, had said earlier. "You look better than we expected. Not as broken as before." It had slid past me at the time, wrapped in the awkwardness of the moment. But now, in the quiet, it hit hard. That wasn't just clumsy phrasing. It was control. A reminder of where they thought I started. A subtle framing of where they thought I still belonged. I stood up. I looked at the photo again, and something shifted inside me. Not fear, not grief. Something sharper. Resolve. I'm not 7 anymore. I'm not powerless. I opened my desk drawer, locked the photo inside, then opened my laptop again. This time, not for searching, but for building. I started logging everything. the exact time I left the office, camera locations near my car, emails I'd received in the last 48 hours, my original adoption records. Any court documents I still had, I didn't know what I'd need yet, but I knew I'd need something. If they were building a narrative, I had to build a defense. My screen lit up with a new notification, one unread email. No name, no subject, just a line. You shouldn't hide from us. I froze. My hand hovered over the mouse. I clicked. An image loaded. Me, standing in my own driveway. Timestamp, 9:12 p.m. Last night. It wasn't taken from the street. It was closer. From somewhere inside the neighborhood. Inside the line I thought they couldn't cross. I realized they weren't waiting for a reunion. They were preparing for a takeover. I sat there in the dark long after the screen dimmed, long after the image burned itself into the back of my mind. My own driveway. My own house. Caught in a frame I never authorized. The line between then and now, the past and the present, blurred in a single click. I barely slept. 2 hours, maybe. I kept waking up in short gasps, convinced someone was at the window. The shadows outside felt heavier than usual. I checked the front door twice, the back door 3 times. At one point, I walked down to the end of the driveway barefoot, scanning the street in my pajama pants like a man trying to make sense of his own reflection. By morning, I was already in clothes, downstairs before anyone else. My hands were shaking as I poured coffee, but I held the cup with both palms, hoping the heat would anchor me. Hannah came in quietly, like she always did, slippers soft against the kitchen tile. She didn't say anything at first, just moved about the kitchen, humming something barely audible. Then, like clockwork, she placed a folded handkerchief near my mug. White cotton. Her handwriting stitched into the edge. For you. Mom. She didn't know. Of course she didn't, and I couldn't bring myself to say a word. I slipped it into my pocket without making eye contact. You didn't sleep much, she said, stirring miso into a small pot. I'm fine, I lied. Daichi joined us a few minutes later. He smiled at me, poured himself tea, and asked about the weather like it actually mattered. I responded on autopilot. None of us brought up the way I kept checking the window. None of us talked about the fact that I hadn't touched my food. After a few bites, I told them I had an early meeting and needed to head out. I grabbed my keys, mumbled something about traffic, and left before either of them could see how badly my hands were still trembling. The drive to the office felt suffocating. I parked, sat there, got out, walked inside, logged in, typed 2 lines of code, and stared at the screen like it was written in another language. By 10:15, I was back in my car. No meeting, no message. I just left. I drove to the waterfront, somewhere open, public, yet quiet enough to think. The breeze carried salt and fog and just enough distance from the noise in my head. I opened my phone and stared at the number from yesterday, still unregistered, still anonymous. I typed, "What do you want?" The reply came seconds later. Finally. They agreed to meet near the edge of the boardwalk, just past the closed food stalls. The place was nearly empty. I saw them before they saw me. Michael and Linda, my biological parents, the people who had once decided I was better off forgotten. Linda spoke first, voice low but intentional. "We're your parents, and we want to fix the past." I didn't blink. "You started by following me. That's how you fix things?" They exchanged a look, one of those silent signals longtime manipulators learn to perfect. Michael pulled out a manila folder, holding it as though he were handing over a birthday card. "What is that?" I asked. "A conversation starter," he said, slipping it into my hand. Inside were typed legal forms, drafts, incomplete, unsigned, but enough to recognize the words custodial reinstatement, family reunification petition. "You can't file this," I said. "I'm 36 years old." Michael smiled faintly. "We know, but claims draw attention. Attention creates leverage." I felt sweat gathering at the back of my neck. Linda chimed in. "We were told by an attorney that the emotional argument could sway public opinion if needed." I looked at them both, really looked this time. "You researched this?" "Of course," she said softly. "You've done well for yourself. We thought reconnecting would benefit everyone." There it was. Benefit. Not heal, not reconnect, not repair. Benefit. "You've been looking into me," I said flatly. Linda didn't deny it. She tilted her head slightly. "Everything online is public." "And what? You're going to claim you raised me now?" Michael's tone didn't waver. "We were young. We didn't know better." I exhaled slowly, keeping my voice even. "You didn't make a mistake. You made a decision. And now, after decades, you want to rewrite it?" Linda stepped forward slightly. "Kael, please. We deserve a chance to be part of your life." I backed away a step. "No, what you want is credit." Their silence was all the confirmation I needed. Then Michael dropped the next blow. "If you won't work with us privately, we'll have to go public. Let people know what was done to us, how our son was taken." "You left me in a hospital hallway," I said sharply. "You left a note saying I'd be better off with someone who could fix me. You don't get to cry foul now." They didn't flinch. That terrified me more than anything. Michael moved closer, just a few inches from my shoulder. "Whether you like it or not, this is the beginning." Before I could step back, he slid something into the outer pocket of my coat. I looked down, an envelope. I didn't open it until they were gone. Inside was a printed sheet. Not legal documents this time. A list, names, addresses, phone numbers, my parents, their workplace schedules, doctor visits, grocery store routines. They had everything. I knew I couldn't protect my family by staying silent anymore. I drove home with both hands clenched on the wheel, jaw locked, the city blurred outside the windshield like a memory I didn't trust anymore. Every vehicle in my rear view felt like it was trailing too long. Every crosswalk held faces that stared too directly. The envelope in my coat pocket felt like a ticking clock I couldn't disarm. Before turning into our neighborhood, I looped the block twice, slow, watching for anything out of rhythm. A parked car idling, a man pretending to check his phone too long. Nothing stood out, but the paranoia had already rooted itself deep. When I finally pulled into our driveway, the porch light flickered once. Daichi must have been tinkering with the wiring again. The sight should have calmed me. Instead, it felt fragile, like one breath would shatter the calm inside this house. Through the front window, I saw Hannah at the stove, pouring water into the teapot. That familiar, slow rhythm, so ordinary it hurt. In the background, Daichi knelt near the cabinet below the sink, adjusting a hinge with the quiet patience he brought to everything. The house smelled like miso and warm rice. None of them knew. None of them knew what I had brought home with me. I stepped inside. Hannah greeted me with her usual warm glance, but didn't comment on how I looked. Maybe she saw it. Maybe she chose silence. She placed a bowl on the table for me anyway. Daichi stood and dusted off his hands. "Cabinet's finally fixed," he said with a faint smile. "Thanks, Dad," I muttered. My voice didn't sound like mine. We sat. I lifted the spoon, but didn't eat. My mind ran circles around how to start, how to tell them, what to say. After 2 false starts, I finally said, I had unexpected contact today. Hannah paused mid-pour, barely noticeable. Then she continued and said, with careful kindness, "That must be complicated for you." I didn't correct her. I couldn't tell her that complicated was a word 10 miles short of terrifying. Daichi simply nodded once, as if giving me space. I didn't tell them about the folder, or the threat, or the list with their names printed alongside their daily routines like a hunting schedule. I didn't say anything at all. Later that afternoon, Daichi went out to check the mailbox. I heard the screen door close, the familiar creak of the hinges. Then silence. A bit too long. When he came back inside, he held a plain white envelope in his hand. "This was taped under the mailbox," he said, brows furrowed. I stood up slowly, my stomach already tightening. Inside was a single photograph, the 3 of us, Hana, Daichi, and me, leaving a grocery store, bags in hand, laughing about something I now couldn't remember. The shot was taken from a distance, the angle clear, deliberate. On the back, someone had written in neat, cold print, "Family Matters." Hana's hand flew to her mouth. Daichi's face went completely still. I took the photo gently, folded it, and walked away before they saw the panic climbing up my throat. In my room, I sat on the floor with my back against the edge of the bed, my knees bent, the photograph on the floor beside me, the handkerchief Hana had given me still in my pocket. My chest felt like it was being crushed from the inside. I kept blaming myself, turning every moment over in my head. I should have shut the conversation down the first time. I should have never replied. I should have... A buzz interrupted my spiral. My phone. One message. No contact name. "Now you understand why you need us." Attached was a photo. It took me half a second to process it, but when I did, my vision narrowed. It was Hana, this morning, in the backyard. She was crouched beside her bonsai tree, watering it gently, the same way she always did on Thursdays. No one else was in the frame, but someone was there, watching, photographing her. She had no idea. I gripped the phone so hard I thought it might snap. My whole body started to tremble. And then the thoughts came back. The ones I thought I had outgrown. This is what you are. Broken. A liability. They were right to leave you. I whispered aloud, "I should have stayed lost." It slipped out before I could stop it. I wasn't just afraid anymore. I was unraveling. The idea that I had endangered the only people who'd ever loved me freely, it was unbearable. I was still sitting there, phone by my feet, when I heard a knock. Soft. The door opened slowly. Hana didn't say anything right away. She just stepped inside, sat down beside me on the carpet, and folded her legs the way she always did when we used to read together. I didn't look at her. I couldn't. She placed one hand lightly on my back, then rested the other in her lap. After a few minutes, she spoke. "You were never a burden. Not one day. Not one breath." Her voice cracked slightly at the end, but she held steady. "I wish you could see yourself the way we do." I couldn't hold it anymore. The tears came fast and hot. I didn't sob. I didn't move. I just let them fall. She noticed the handkerchief balled up in my hand. Quietly, she reached over and straightened it across my palm. "You're still our son," she said, "no matter who's knocking at the door." Those words, so simple, cut deeper than anything that came before. It was like someone had opened a window in a room that had been sealed shut for years. I turned to look at her. Her eyes were tired, but steady. Daiichi was standing in the hallway, not intruding, but close. I wiped my face, took a deep breath, and finally said, "I need to tell you everything." They deserved the truth. And for the first time, I was ready to give it. My father's face hardened in a way I had never seen before. He didn't ask questions, didn't flinch. He stared down at the printouts in his hands, the photos, the messages, the threats, and something shifted in him. Slowly, he set the papers on the table and looked up at me with the calm intensity of a man who had seen enough. Hannah stood beside him, her fingertips resting on the edge of the table, trembling just slightly. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She didn't need to speak. The shift in the room was loud enough. This was no longer just my problem. Daiichi rose and walked into the hallway. I heard a key turn, a soft creak of hinges. When he came back, he was holding a small steel lockbox. It looked older than me. He placed it on the table, clicked it open, and began pulling out documents, copies of legal agreements, notarized forms, emergency contact lists, and a folded sheet with names and phone numbers I didn't recognize. "We've dealt with hard people before," he said, voice steady, controlled. "People who wanted things they had no right to. You think we adopted a child without knowing how to protect him?" I couldn't speak. I had never seen this version of Daiichi before. He'd always been quiet, gentle, the man who fixed squeaky doors and taught me to tie fishing knots. But this was different. This was steel. "We start organizing," he said. "You bring me everything, every file, every message. We prepare." For the first time in days, something inside me straightened. I moved to the dining room, grabbed my laptop, and pulled up the folder I had started. Threats, emails, photos, timelines. I opened a blank document, began sorting the data piece by piece. "Should we call the police?" I asked, glancing up. "Not yet," Daiichi replied. "They'll brush it off unless we give them the full picture. Right now, this still looks like messy family drama. We need to make it undeniable." The printer hummed as Hannah began making hard copies of each screenshot. We worked in silence, the air between us tight with purpose. There was no panic now. Just focus. Until the lights flickered. All three of us froze. Then Hannah moved to the window, parting the curtain with 2 fingers. "There's a car," she whispered. "Across the street. Headlights off. Not moving." I stood beside her and my stomach dropped. I recognized the silhouette in the driver's seat. Vague, but unmistakable. Watching. Daiichi stepped forward, his voice low. "Stay away from the windows." My pulse spiked. I grabbed my coat, ready to storm out. Hannah blocked me with both arms, her hands firm on my chest. "No," she said. "That's what they want. You go out there alone. They control the story. You react. They spin it." I stood there, fists clenched, chest heaving. It took everything not to shove the door open and confront them head on. But she was right. I stepped back, and then my work phone buzzed. One new email, forwarded anonymously. Subject line, "Concerning employee conduct, Kael Rooker." My heart stalled. I clicked it open. False accusations, theft of company property, claims of mental instability, allegations I'd abandoned elderly family members without support. It was professional character assassination, coordinated, malicious, and timed to wound. "They sent this to your HR?" Hannah asked, hand covering her mouth. Daiichi exhaled hard, his jaw set. "They're trying to ruin you from the inside." I sat down slowly. That same hollow cold tried to creep back in, but I didn't let it. Not this time. I opened a new folder. I labeled it Counteraction. Into it, I dragged every file, The photos of the car, the surveillance shots, the email to HR, every screenshot, every voice note I'd recorded on my phone. I wrote short summaries of each threat, timestamps, patterns. Daichi stood beside me the whole time, reading over my shoulder. "You're doing good," he said. "Keep going." After a while, Hannah brought over a fresh cup of tea. Quietly, she placed a clean white handkerchief next to my laptop. Not the same one from before. A new one, folded neatly. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. That small gesture told me exactly what I was fighting for. I whispered to myself, "I'm not letting them take anything from us. Not this house, not my name, not the people who raised me." I closed the folder, sat back, looked at them both. "They think I'm still the kid they left behind," I said, my voice clear, low. "They're about to learn something new." Daichi nodded once. "Then let's prepare for their next move." Outside, across the street, the car's window rolled down halfway. A flash went off. They were photographing the house now. This wasn't intimidation anymore. It was war. I realized in that moment that my parents weren't just escalating. They were framing me. The red and blue lights bounced across the walls like some twisted reflection of Christmas. Hannah stood motionless by the kitchen island, her hands still resting on the ceramic mug she hadn't lifted in minutes. Daichi looked out through the side window, his jaw locked. A firm knock at the front door cracked the silence. I turned to them and nodded. "Let me handle it." Daichi didn't stop me, but he stood just behind, a silent wall of calm support. I opened the door. 2 officers stood under the porch light, their expressions clipped and rehearsed. "Evening," the taller one said. "We received a call reporting a potential domestic threat at this address." The words didn't make sense at first. Domestic threat? I felt the floor shift beneath me. One of the officers added, "Mind if we speak with you outside for a moment?" I stepped out. Hannah followed, slipping her arm through mine as if she could steady me through contact alone. The officer opened a small notepad. "We were told there may be concern regarding the welfare of elderly residents inside the home. Specifically, allegations of verbal threats, possible emotional instability, and coercion for financial support." I blinked. "Excuse me?" He read again, this time slower, like it might help it make sense. Every line was a grotesque reversal of the truth. Weaponized compassion. "I've been protecting them," I said, barely holding my voice steady. "My biological parents." "We understand tensions can arise," the other officer cut in, polite but detached. "We just need to make sure everything inside is safe and no one feels threatened." Before I could speak again, Daichi stepped forward. "We are his adoptive parents," he said, his voice calm but sharp at the edges. "He has never threatened us. What he has done is show us proof of harassment, stalking, and digital intimidation from the very people who abandoned him as a child." He handed over a printed copy of the threatening messages. The taller officer's brow creased as he read. "We will still need to conduct a quick walkthrough of the home," the second officer said. "Standard safety procedure." It felt humiliating, letting them walk through the very rooms that had been my only true refuge. But we complied. Minutes later, as they left, the first officer offered a quick nod to Daichi. "We'll file a note about the conflicting reports," he said. "But keep any further documentation. This might not be the end of it." And then they were gone. Daichi stepped out to check the car that had been sitting across the street all evening. He returned seconds later. "They're gone." Vanished. No headlights, no trace. Just gone, like smoke evaporating before we could catch it in our hands. They timed it, I muttered. Knew the cops would distract us. Slipped out while we were frozen. Inside, Hannah sat on the couch, her arms wrapped around herself, eyes blank. This isn't safety anymore, she whispered. This is war. I went out into the backyard, needing air, needing distance from walls that now felt too tight. The cold cut into my arms, but I didn't go back in. I gripped the wooden railing and leaned forward. Broken. Not worth raising. I could still hear them, their voices from years ago, curled up in the corners of my childhood. And now, they were back, not with apologies, not with answers, but with strategy, with lies, and calculated destruction. My phone buzzed. I looked down. A text from a coworker I barely spoke to. Hey, you okay? Why's your name on this? Attached was a link. It led to a community forum, local, mostly used for yard sales and lost pets. The headline turned my stomach. Concern about a troubled young man in our neighborhood. There I was, standing on my own porch, speaking to the police. The photo was recent, maybe 15 minutes old. I didn't need to guess who posted it. I walked back inside, showed Hannah and Daichi. Daichi's expression turned to stone. I'm going over there. No, Hannah said, grabbing his arm. That's what they want. They want us angry. They want us to lash out. That's the story they're writing. I dropped onto the dining chair, my fingers already pulling my laptop closer. If they want to tell a story, I said, then I'll tell mine, and mine comes with receipts. I opened a blank document, then another, pulling in files, screenshots, photos, every shred of evidence we'd collected. I started laying out timelines, identifying patterns, linking names to dates. Daichi hovered nearby, reading quietly. Hannah brought a cup of tea, setting it beside me without a word. They want to paint me unstable, I said. Then I'll show them what clarity looks like. I wasn't typing out of fear anymore. There was no panic in my fingers, just focus. This wasn't the hunted speaking. This was someone sharpening his teeth. The words came quickly. Incident 1, contact outside workplace. Incident 2, anonymous threat delivered via mailbox. Incident 3, photo surveillance of family. Incident 4, false report to law enforcement. I stopped for a breath, looked at Hannah and Daichi. They think they know me, I said, but they've never met the man I became after they left. Daichi didn't say anything for a moment. Then he nodded. They're about to. That was when the porch light flickered. Once, then twice. I turned toward the window. The car was back, just sitting there, watching. And before I could move, my phone rang. I never expected the one person who could destroy their entire plan to call me. The screen lit up with a number I didn't recognize. For half a second, I hesitated. Then I answered. Kael? The voice was quiet, trembling slightly. Yes, I said. Who is this? It's me. I'm your birth mother's sister. I didn't speak. I wasn't sure I could. My hand tightened around the phone, and I slowly sank into the chair at the dining table. Hannah moved beside me and sat down, watching my face carefully. I shouldn't be calling, I know, but I can't stay quiet anymore, she continued. They're lying to you, about everything, about who you are, and why they gave you up. I swallowed, unsure what to say. My chest tightened. Was this another trap? I left the family years ago, she said. Because of them. Because of what they did to you. I set the phone on speaker. Daichi leaned closer, silent. The room felt like it had stopped breathing. They didn't give you up because you were broken, she said. They gave you up because you weren't useful to them. My hands curled into fists on the table. They didn't want a child. They wanted a perfect accessory, a status piece. When you needed more time at the hospital, when the doctors said you'd need extra care, they decided you weren't worth the effort. My stomach twisted. I have proof, she added quickly. I kept it all. I didn't think I'd ever use it, but I saved it anyway. I'll send it now. Seconds later, my inbox pinged. I opened the file. First, a scanned hospital form. My name, date of birth. Then, under parental refusal to hold or engage with infant, my biological mother and father's signatures. Another document, a social worker's note. Heard the father say, "Too expensive, not worth the trouble." Mother remained silent. They declined bonding time. I couldn't move. And then, an old voicemail. A raspy male voice, familiar in a way that made my stomach lurch. "What, you think I regret it? Raising a defective kid? Hell no. I made the right call." Hana gasped softly. Daichi looked away, his jaw locked. I just sat there, trembling. Not from weakness, but because every lie they'd built had just been torn apart. My aunt's voice returned. They're already preparing a public statement. They want to frame this like they were forced to let you go. And now they want a second chance. They're spinning a redemption story. She paused. They're trying to own your pain, Kael, to make themselves the heroes. I looked at Hana, then at Daichi. "No," I said, my voice low but steady. "Not anymore." I stood. For the first time all week, I didn't feel like the ground was crumbling. I felt taller. "I'm done reacting. Tonight, we end this." Daichi nodded once, firmly. Hana placed her hand over mine. "You're ready," she said. We spent the next hour gathering everything. The messages, the threats, the photo from the mailbox, the HR sabotage email, the fabricated police report, the smear post online, and now the hospital records and voicemail. I opened a blank document and started building a timeline, labeled folders, metadata, timestamps, witnesses, names. This wasn't a defense. It was a case. And then I sent it. The email went to 5 people: my attorney, HR legal at work, the local detective I'd spoken to before, a social worker listed in the original reports, and my aunt. Subject line: evidence of coordinated harassment and fraud. Filing tonight. Each attachment was labeled. Each point was backed by something hard. A file, a message, a voice. 10 minutes passed. Then replies. My lawyer. Received. Let's talk first thing in the morning. The detective. Thank you for the detailed report. Based on the evidence, we are initiating a formal investigation into the parties you named. I read that line twice. Formal investigation. It was happening. As I leaned back, Hana quietly placed something beside my laptop. The handkerchief. White. Folded neatly. Not out of comfort this time. It was a symbol. This was where love lived. I touched the fabric gently and let my breath settle. Then I opened a new email. One recipient. My biological parents. I kept it short. I know everything. And so will the authorities. This ends now. I hit send. A moment later. Read. Then their reply. You think you've won? This isn't over. I stared at the screen and smiled, calm, unshaken. Yes, I said under my breath. It is. They came to our door at sunrise, not with threats, but with consequences. I had been sitting at the dining table, barely having slept, when I saw the soft sweep of red and blue light wash across the living room walls. For a brief second, my heart lurched. but it wasn't the kind of panic that once haunted me. This was something different. Preparedness, readiness. I rose and moved toward the window. Outside, 2 police cruisers and an unmarked sedan rolled slowly into the driveway. The morning light was still soft, casting long shadows over the front lawn. Hannah joined me, her hand finding my forearm and holding it gently. Behind us, Daichi stood quietly, his arms folded, eyes alert but calm. A woman in a dark blazer stepped out of the unmarked car. She looked official. Firm posture, clipboard in hand, sharp eyes. She walked to the door and knocked. I opened it. "Mr. Rooker," she asked, "I'm Investigator Ramsey. We need to speak with you and your parents." I nodded and stepped aside. Inside, she spoke with precision. "We've reviewed the materials you submitted overnight. The content was extensive, detailed, and cross-referenced. Your aunt also filed a sworn affidavit early this morning. We followed up immediately." She paused, meeting my eyes. "The hospital records are authentic. The voicemail is admissible. What you've shown points to a coordinated effort to defame, manipulate, and possibly exploit you. We are issuing warrants for questioning and detainment pending further review." Next to me, Hannah let out a soft breath, one she hadn't even realized she was holding. Daichi gave a single, silent nod. "Thank you," I said quietly. Within 15 minutes, I was standing on the front porch, watching from a distance as the officers crossed the street. The house my biological parents had been staying in, the one they'd rented just days before, looked smaller in the rising light. The officers moved efficiently. Voices were raised. I heard my biological father yell something unintelligible, while my mother collapsed against the doorframe with performative sobs. I'd seen it before, her ability to cry on command, to shift blame before anyone asked a question. But this time, I didn't flinch. This time, they didn't get to control the script. I watched until the officers separated them, one squad car backing up slowly, the other preparing for transport. As they were read their rights, my mother's gaze swept toward me across the street. Her expression was a mixture of shock, fury, and, beneath it all, something that looked almost like betrayal. They had underestimated the child they left behind. By late morning, the ripple effects had begun. The online forum post, the one filled with accusations and veiled warnings, vanished. A moderator's note appeared in its place, removed for violation of community policy. An email from my HR department followed shortly after, marked urgent. Apologize for the recent confusion and distress. Upon further review, your record remains clear and fully in good standing. Please let us know if you'd like to speak with someone in confidence regarding support moving forward. And then my phone buzzed again. "Kael, it's Marcus," my manager said on the other end. "I just wanted to say, the way you handled all of this, not many could. You've got character." I thanked him, but my voice felt hollow. Gratitude and exhaustion had tangled together. Not sadness exactly, but a sense that something long buried had finally surfaced and let go. That evening, after everything had settled, I stepped outside to the porch alone. The sky was slipping into twilight, pale orange streaking across the trees. I sat in the same old chair Daichi used to fix every spring, the wood familiar beneath my palms. In my hands was the white handkerchief Hannah had set down earlier that week, its corners now slightly frayed, fabric soft from years of care. It wasn't just a handkerchief anymore. It was a thread of memory, a symbol of the hands that had cleaned up after me, held me through illness, tucked me in, even when I pushed them away. This, not DNA, was family. I looked out toward the street where they had been taken and felt nothing but stillness. Not revenge, not triumph, just peace. Later, I called my aunt. She picked up on the first ring. Her voice cracked the moment she said my name. "I should have come forward sooner," she whispered. "I didn't know how. I was scared." "I know," I told her, "but you came when it mattered." We spoke for nearly an hour about my first few days in the hospital, how she had tried to intervene, how the rest of the family shunned her when she objected. She told me things I hadn't known, and some I hadn't wanted to. But I listened, and I promised I'd call again. That night, I found myself thinking not just about the past week, but about all the quiet years that came before. The dinners with Daichi where we barely spoke but somehow understood each other. The nights Hana would sit at the edge of my bed when I was sick, reading quietly until I fell asleep. I never needed anyone to claim me, because I'd already been chosen. Chosen by the people who showed up. Chosen by the ones who stayed. As the final threads of sunlight pulled away, I walked back into the house and found Hana in the kitchen. Daichi was putting away dishes from dinner. I looked at them, at the life we'd built between grief and grace. "I'm staying," I said, more to myself than anyone else. Not because I'm afraid to leave, but because this is home. No one needed to respond. Later, as the house settled into silence, I returned to my room, pulled out a fresh notebook, and sat by the window. My hand hovered for a moment before I began to write. I wasn't broken. I was abandoned by the wrong people and found by the right ones.